Колеги, доброго ранку.
Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for being with us in the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Those who watch us online, we continue our cooperation with the Democratic Initiatives Fund. And today we have a topic, think tanks in Ukraine and Germany, challenges and prospects of cooperation. And I'm glad to give the floor to Iryna Bekeshkina, Director of Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation. She will outline the main. Our fund, Democratic Initiative, will celebrate 25 years of its existence. And I would like to say that now we can compare the situation. The situation is unique. They are really needed, such centers like ours. And we need new quality and responsibility, and people need us. That's why cooperation with the leading think tanks of Europe is really important for us. We cooperate with our colleagues from different think tanks in Europe. We feel the difference. The difference that is surprising to our foreign colleagues. In Ukraine, think tanks, especially now, in order to be effective, it means that think should be a tank, so we fight for our analytical research, our proposals on politics, and often it is efficient. Example that is unique even at the international scale. This is RPR, Reanimation Package of Reform, that unites 20 groups and 66 organizations. Some of them are full members, some of them are associated members, and they carry out policy successfully, not only consultations and meetings, and also take part in different analytical groups with different governmental bodies. Also, they organize flash mobs, cooperate with the NGOs, not only analytical centers. In Ukraine, in order that the think tank be efficient, it should have advocacy force. And the situation in which the think tanks in Ukraine worked until before. So we carried out analysis, we conducted roundtables, and I was surprised that we made really a lot to higher educational institutions, and they taught students, and they included our research in their curricula in order to educate psychologists and other specialists. And also I work in sociology, Institute of the Academy of Sciences. But you know that academic institutions, they work in the scientific field, and this is their mission. As to the analysis of current events and recommendations, academic institutions, they are, and the higher educational institutions, this is not their function. And at the ministries, there are no such powerful departments, research departments. That's why they need the capabilities of the think tanks, and they are mainly funded by international donors. And this is a good opportunity to have analytical research and not to pay for them. And often, from the start, our foreign partners, they were surprised that we have such a different situation in the sphere of analytical centers, because this is not just analytical work. Of course, the quality of research is needed, because this research is used by different organizations and media. There is Open Society Institute, and there is Think Tanks program. And despite good attitude, they didn't provide grant to us because they said you are advocacy, not a think tank. But we had a lot of analytical research, and our advocacy, they thought that we were more advocacy group than analytical center. But now the situation is different, and I would say that we really have experience to share, and of course we need to bring some methods from abroad, some forms, some policy papers, how it is done. So we have a lot to learn from our international partners, because they have great experience that they have been gaining for many years, and we need such cooperation, because we are not well known in Europe. We have some programs, and people go there, and people in Europe do not know a lot about Ukraine, and we should provide people with information about real, objective knowledge about Ukraine. And it should be done by analytical centers, by think tanks. And for this, we should know the form in which Western people are ready to get this information. We should know how to do it. And in cooperation with our colleagues from abroad, we can better organize different events for journalists, for politicians, because this is their environment. They understand their environment better. And also a question arises, why do they need us? And the interest is really high, because I believe that the future of Europe starts here in Ukraine now. And if Ukraine is successful, because there are some post-Soviet states that are under influence of Russia, and how to make Ukraine successful. We need experience of Western countries, and this experience can be provided in the best way by Western think tanks. And I believe that our colleagues from Germany, that they are here, it means that they need us, not only we need them. And I would need to go soon. So, Fund of Democratic Initiative have many initiatives, and we carry out at the administration of the president at 11. There will be a meeting about frontline areas, and there will be representatives of think tanks, NGOs, journalists, and also officials who are going to join us, because they believe that cooperation with think tanks is needed in the situation of modern reformed Ukraine. Thank you for attention. Thank you, Iryna. I would like to give the floor Thank you for this.
Thank you for introduction. I would like to represent the project. The project is called Strengthening Ukrainian Think Tanks Capacity and Strengthening the cooperation with the EU. This is a joint project of the Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation and supported by the Germany, the Embassy of Germany. I would like to thank for support of this project and for implementation of this project. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Michael Schmidt from Embassy, from German Embassy. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be among you today and to participate in this event. As you know, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany supports this project. I think that this project will be very useful both for the Germans and the Ukrainians. Thus, we can help each other in this context. And I personally can say that the work of those analytical centers for us is very useful. As embassy representatives, we quite often are interested in their outputs, and we quite often use their findings both here in Ukraine and in Germany. I think that this is a good part of Ukrainian policy and policy analysis in Ukraine. I'm happy that the analytical centers, both in Ukraine and in Germany, are working on the cooperation, further cooperation, are thinking how it could be developed between Ukraine and Germany. I think that the practical findings of this project will allow us to follow this way. I am not sure, I'm not an expert in analytical centers. That's why I will speak briefly, but I will follow the further discussion today with big interest. Thank you. Now I would like to represent our panelists. I'm Liudmyla Melnyk. I'm representing the European Policy Institute. I'm happy to introduce Oleksiy Sydorchuk, political analyst from Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiative Foundation. He will represent our survey. Also, I represent Olga Lvova. This is a new partner in our project, and Olga will represent a group of Ukrainian think tanks, and Dmytro Shulga from International Renaissance Foundation. I would like to start from a presentation of our survey because it is the core of our project. The survey was carried out by Institute of European Policy and Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation to understand the issues that they face, to understand cooperation between Ukrainian and German think tanks, and to understand the level of perception of the products of think tanks in Ukraine and Germany. We hold a survey among 11 German think tanks cooperating with Ukrainian organizations, and my colleague Oleksiy will describe survey held in Ukraine. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I will present results from Ukrainian survey. As Liudmyla mentioned, we questioned representatives from 20 think tanks in Ukraine, mainly from Kyiv, but there were some think tanks from provinces. Today I will represent just basic findings. First, we try to understand how they see the objective of their work. And there were two intentions: to fill in some topical niche and to have impact on politics or policy. When we asked what should be the main sphere of activity for think tank, they mentioned research work and production of the analytical papers and the impact on policy decision making. And we found that this element is not less important than analytical work itself. Here we see the results, how this think tanks assessed their colleagues. There was a 5-point scale, and the biggest number of points was awarded to communicational component of the think tank projects. All the rest are at a very all the rest of activities are assessed at a rather low level, including analytical capacity, impact on decision making. The least was financial stability, although this is, I think, subjective assessment. We also asked how Ukrainian analytical centers assessed their Western colleagues, and here you see much higher points given to Western colleagues, and this shows that Ukrainian centers understand that their colleagues in the West are at a higher level of capacity, so to say. We also tried to understand who are target groups for the centers, whom they influence, and we found out that think tanks believe that they work for mass media, NGOs, and international donors. People who are interested in the work of think tanks definitely know that the major products of the think tanks are consumed by those three groups which I mentioned. Although one of the objectives of those centers is to influence authorities, the power in making decisions. While in majority international donors are major consumers of these products because they commission the research. Also, mass media are important, and analytical infographics is one of those products which becomes more and more popular in spreading findings of the think tanks. Especially when these infographics could be easily used by mass media. Also, press conferences are very influential in the influencing the power and providing as in a role of providing comments for mass media. The think tanks believes that they have impact on decision making in the country, but on the other hand, when we asked who is the target group of your think tank, the biggest majority mentioned the government bodies, although when we asked to our consumers of think tank products in the country, the majority of them mentioned other groups, not government authorities. Maybe this is a reflection of stronger perception of their own consultancy capacity and impact capacity than the other think tanks' capacity. About impact on the power. We asked how think tanks influence the governmental bodies. Why some non-governmental experts to decision making and via cooperation with international organizations. Actually, this just proves the lack of systemic cooperation between think tanks and governmental agencies. Then coming back to the impact tools, we can state that the channels of influence are multiple. Public events, publications in mass media, and social networks, and spreading analytical products in various sources. Then we asked about cooperation with the Western think tanks in general and with the German think tanks in particular. And we found out that cooperation is run at non-systemic basis, on the project-to-project basis. At least this is the specificity of cooperation with German think tanks. On the one hand, One of the reasons could be unstable financial situation, but we should not blame just this reason. I think what is more important is the lack of a long-term systemic projects. We have now a system of remote or distance grants offered by Renaissance Foundation, and which make the cooperation possible even at a distance. Another reason for insufficient cooperation could be a poor awareness about availability of foreign partners, maybe institutional differences and insufficient competencies among Ukrainian think tanks. Then we ask the question, what is interesting to German colleagues among the products or in Ukrainian think tanks. Respondents suggested relations with Russia, macroeconomic development, specificities in public opinion, solution of the Donbass conflict, anti-corruption work, and decentralization. And further on, I would like to demonstrate that this does not coincide with the opinion of German think tanks when they were asked a similar question. With this, I would like to give the floor to Olena. We had 11 half-structured interviews which were transcribed and analyzed based on quality analysis method. We questioned Institute of European Policy, DGAP, SVP, DGO, ECFR, European Academy Berlin, Bertelsmann Stiftung, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Friedrich Naumann Stiftung, and Heinrich Böll Stiftung. These organizations had a long-term experience of cooperation with Ukrainian think tanks. Also, we invited representatives of NGOs working with Ukrainian society. Major characteristics of the think tank activities. We try to understand the difference between think tanks in Germany and think tanks in Ukraine, whether there are any difference in self-perception. For German think tanks, the most important aspects were systematization of available knowledge, research activity, analysis, careful analysis based on facts, scientific character, political consultations, and mass media for them are a secondary audience, which is not of primarily importance, while in Ukraine it's vice versa. These are characteristics of think tank activities in Germany. This slide shows the vision of Ukrainian think tanks by German think tanks. They suggested following characteristic: hybrid nature, that is a combination of classical think tank with the civil society organization features and with advocacy. Advocacy is another feature which is strongly peculiar to Ukrainian think tanks, and German think tanks believes that mass media are major target audience for Ukrainian mass media. The next important aspect was that German experts paid a lot of attention to the structure, content, and graphical design of the papers, of analytical papers. They stack with some specific structure, introduction and characteristic of the problem, then narration of data and facts, then analysis and evaluation, and finally conclusions and recommendations. When we asked German experts how do they perceive Ukrainian analytical papers, they mentioned the following: non-consideration of the frequent non-consideration of the context, insufficient collection of data, vague or absent references, unclear division between own position and analysis, and also the general style, the general writing style could be characterized as subjective, philosophical, and emotional. German experts believe that Ukrainian analytical paper structure is based on messages and on reflection of their own position. And also the very strong advocacy component. The next aspect was devoted to project management and communication. Here also we see the major differences. German experts believe that in Ukraine, short-term planning is quite often, while in Germany, they apply long-term planning. Also, full transparency in communication when both sides implement joint projects. The next aspect is clear and concise structure of this site. Then such a minor thing, but which is of big importance for them. This is a signature in electronic, in emails. Then the outlay of printed production. All these components, all important components should be reflected in outlay of printed products. The sources of funding should be clearly shown on the website. And another important moment was that via newsletter and of personal communication, German colleagues can find partners and colleagues in Ukraine. And when we review the topics of the spheres of main interest in Ukraine, they are much different from what Ukrainian analysts believed. So the biggest priority are reforming process, implementation of association agreements, social sphere, education, healthcare, pension system, regional development, internal domestic policy, and security area. Also, they are interested to know whether Ukraine is familiar with the situation in Germany, and some expert believes that information about European Union, about European realities should be more popularized in Ukraine, which will allow Ukraine to understand the EU better. And the latest conclusion was that the biggest differences are rooted not in the institutional aspects, but in intracultural differences. When the discussions in Germany are organized, organizers invite at least 4 experts, and discussion happens in a form of a talk, while in Ukraine discussion is quite often held in a form of press conference and more communicate with the audience. This is so to say intracultural difference. And planning, the horizon of planning. These were major results of our survey, and now I would like to give the floor to Olga. Olga had developed a mapping of Ukrainian think tanks, platforms, initiatives. For us, it is important. We hope it will be positively perceived in Germany. Quite often our experts complain that they are unable to find partners, and thus we will strengthen presence of Ukrainian think tanks in Germany.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Before presenting this map, first about the initiative. Iryna outlined the importance of think tanks and their role in the state building, and we popularize analytical centers, we carry out monitoring of think tanks, and also we motivate people to read these materials. The government, the donors, the media, but also the public. And we would like to popularize think tanks, their work, and to show their contribution into democracy. And we place not only our own content, but also we provide the opportunity for others to place their materials, and we are on the social media. So it is important to develop this area and the changes in the world and the epicenter of events that Ukraine is now. The more the population and organizations use their materials, the better it will be. So this area of work outlined by Liudmyla, this is the start. It will be added, and this is the list of think tanks and initiatives and platforms. So we wanted to see where these centers are located and how their presence influence and also their presence in the social media. You see on the slide that the majority of analytical centers and initiatives are in Kiev. Some regions are not represented by analytical centers because in the context of decentralization, this cooperation is very important. From the occupied territories, the centers went to the controlled territory or stopped their work altogether. This list includes not only classic analytical centers, but also hybrid analytical centers that carry out advocacy functions and that are not only involved in analysis or deal with separate elements of these activities. And also, these are the centers where all components are united, human resources and technical resources. Also, presence in the media and on websites. This is very important that all analytic centers have their pages on the internet. So some of them do not have such pages, those centers that were created recently. Also, sites in English, and half of organizations have pages in English. And this materials are translated, and also this area should be developed. And about 90 think tanks have their page on Facebook. They understand the importance of providing this information in the social media. And sometimes the information provided faster on the page than on the site. And Twitter is 1/5 of the list provided. And there is such a component that overall trend in Ukraine is use of Twitter and content about 10. And we observed the when these centers were created in 1999 and 2015. These are the years when the majority of centers were created. And the minimum 1990 and 1904. The majority of organizations are non-governmental organizations, NGOs, some state organizations, and some university analytical centers. Also, I would like to state that we invite foreign audience and we ask them to use the materials. And as Liudmyla said, the topics that are interesting to Western audience and decentralization, situation in the East, and the analytical product that is translated is minimum. So that's why there should be more activities in order to translate materials. So this is the list of organizations, and for the German audience, this will be really useful. This is an interactive map. You can go to the Facebook page or sites of different organizations. And now I would like to give the floor to Dmytro. Dmytro, tell us, please, about your experience of cooperation with German analytical centers. Where do you see prospects for such cooperation, and how can we improve this cooperation? Thank you. I will start with the overall comment on. I agree with what was said about the activity of analytical centers. They should and also they should be like tanks. They should promote what they analyze, and advocacy is a powerful function, and it is the huge task for today. At the same time, I believe that we should not forget that think tanks, what differs them in classic understanding, in Western understanding, in right understanding. Think tank should differ from many other NGOs and institutions that can carry out advocacy activities is that analytical center can analyze policy and conducts analysis of policy and analyzes policy and communicate with stakeholders, with interested parties, understand their positions, and based on this analysis, it proposes options and carry out advocacy of best decisions. And in order this advocacy campaign be successful, there should be grounds for this, not just some arguments provided by the media. And the situation should be analyzed, the problem should be revealed, it should be properly analyzed. We should analyze positions of different stakeholders. So we should analyze options, how to solve the problem. And then, you know, that each option has its drawbacks and benefits. And of course, political decisions are difficult, and we cannot just advocate for one option because it is not always efficient, and sometimes it can face opposition, or there can be arguments because of this. And one experts, they propose one option and deliver advocacy campaign, others provide other view, and position of civil society can differ, and these are just options. And we see, and our Western colleagues also understand this. And I believe that Germany, for us, is important country for cooperation, and International Foundation, Renaissance Foundation, and we did a lot in order that Ukrainian voices were heard in world community, in Europe, in different countries of the world. We started with the campaign. We informed people that here there are no Nazis, there are no such thing at all. So we provide information about the problems that are important: Donbas, Crimea, association agreement, energy sphere. So these are important issues that should be communicated to the world properly in order that we had better opportunities and progress. And I would say that comparing with 2014, the Ukraine is not in the highlight of the media, because you see that there are less journalists for example, in this center now. So objectively, the focus on Ukraine is not so high, and we may say that Germany is one of not many countries where there is expert community who follow closely the events in Ukraine. This is unique situation, and as my colleague stated, in other countries, there is no such expert community that would follow events in Ukraine. So the level of understanding among experts in other states, they do not have proper understanding. And in Germany, they have deep knowledge about Ukraine, and also there are journalists who know Ukrainian issues, and people who understand the situation. So Germany is one of the countries who really deal with Ukraine. They understand us, they understand our language, and of course we need translation, and we should understand that we do not live in closed worlds, and what we discuss can and will be communicated to other communities. And I heard from people who live in Germany, they say that Ukrainian experts and activists come to Germany and they want to educate Germans, to tell them everything about Ukraine, because they think that they do not know a lot, but this is a mistake. People go there and they meet with experts. So, of course, the information should be communicated to the right audience, and expert community know about Ukraine. They need more deep and comprehensive information. They know about aggression against Ukraine. They know a lot of things about Ukraine. They should be informed in more detail about events in Ukraine, and we should understand it clearly in communication with our foreign partners. We should understand clearly the target audience and the level of their knowledge about Ukraine, and we should build our research and analytical papers and based on this. We should understand that the situation differs in different states. We are speaking not just with Europe, we are speaking with different audiences in Germany, in France, in other states. And also there are different levels of communication. Thank you. In the framework of our research, we prepared recommendations, and our research will be ready in 2 weeks in Ukrainian and Germany. The recommendations, while preparing for the meetings in Germany, we should understand to whom we communicate, with whom we meet. It's not about messages, but about facts and analysis and understanding of cultural differences. Also, advocacy component, it is not properly highlighted in Germany, and we should pay attention that infographics should be together with analytical material. Also, we should provide information about publisher and place, and information about project in the framework of which analytical paper was prepared. Also, we should pay attention of our German counterparts to those research and surveys, and we should translate them into English, because English was mentioned in German surveys, and experts said that it is enough to have these materials in English. And to carry out proactive search for experts, for stakeholders. So you should pay attention to analytical materials, to draw attention of experts, to draw attention of specialists to those pages on the internet. Also, one of possible recommendations is that we should invite people to come here, German experts, and that would broaden our contacts between our think tanks in Ukraine and Germany. And if you have questions, we will be glad to answer.
Valeria Tertechka. I represent National Management Academy under the President and something else. In the year 2013, 2014, we carried out assessment of think tanks. The methodology was then presented, given to the Renaissance Foundation. In order to carry out rating, we first had a round table, and then showed our methodology to our colleagues. So the ratings are very important, and it allowed to see the niches where it is useful to work. This was comment about subjectivity and communication. And one more comment. When some ideas are discussed, it is easier to dispute on them. And the third, strategic planning area is very promising for think tanks. I think that this is very promising, very good field for our think tanks to apply their efforts. The question is whether we are trying to do something or just waiting that somebody will come and change. Thank you. I would like to make a remark of ratings. The Lauder Institute carries out ratings in all the countries, and in 2014, 2015, only Razumkov Center and the CPS were in that ratings. But our initiative tried to carry out, to ask leaders of think tanks whether they wish to be represented in this rating. Sometimes they do not understand how that rating is formed. On the other hand, whether there is a need to do in Ukraine a thing which is not very much understandable. Quite often the issue is, what is the sense to do this? Thank you for raising the issue about ratings. From my point of view, ratings are useful because the power of think tanks in Ukraine is rather strong, and this is mentioned, and the capacity of think tanks in Ukraine is rather high, which was mentioned by our colleagues from Moldova, from Georgia, from other countries, and quite often our think tanks contribute much to formation of policy. First of all, I would like to thank you for presenting your results. Maybe in future we would prefer having such analysis, such comparisons with other countries in the United States or maybe in other countries where they have quite different tradition of think tanks. And also, I would advise you to look at smaller centers, Democracy International. We are funded by Germany, and I would offer you to pay attention at smaller think tanks like we. Thank you. Today we mentioned that the context is very important, and when Ukrainian experts are getting ready to make presentation, they should clearly understand who would be the audience. I understand that discourse in Germany is quite different from discourse in Great Britain, and we should pay attention at the context. Thank you. Since there are no further questions, let us finish our press conference. Thank you.